Hey, good morning. So I'm a huge fan of Hank and John Green. They do a ton of good work with nonprofits as well as really cool initiatives in healthcare in Sierra Leone. If you ask me to point to two people that I think are genuinely good, that have some sort of celebrity following, I'd probably point to those guys. Other thing that they do, they send video messages to each other and they keep it to a 5-minute rule. So they cover a lot of information, but they do it very quickly and they keep it brief, which I think maybe that rule could be helpful for me because I'm notorious for not keeping it brief. So this last week, my wife and I left downtown Buenos Aires to come to a mountain town in the Andes called Bariloche. I think Bariloche is at the top of the Patagonia region, which is actually pretty cool because I was worried that we weren't going to get to come down to Patagonia because it's very much the winter and I thought it'd be too cold. Bariloche has been really great. It's been really quiet. It's been super peaceful just getting to be in this smaller mountain town versus Buenos Aires, which is a lot like New York City, where I've learned that if the city doesn't sleep, you don't get to either. September is right at the end of the winter season, so it teeters right between snowy and rainy. Sometimes even within the same day, we'll have a couple hours of snow followed by a few hours of rain. However, on La Catedral, the ski slopes that we went up to, it's still snowy up toward the top there. Isabel and I went snowboarding, and for the first few days we stayed toward the bottom of the mountain where the beginner slopes and the intermediate slopes were. On the last day that we went, it was getting pretty hot, so I was debating taking off some of my layers down there at the bottom of the mountain, but we decided we wanted to ride the lift all the way to the top because there was a blue route you could take coming all the way down, blue being intermediate. Shoot, when we got up there, I was glad I had those extra layers because, man, it was cold and still snowing at the top of the mountain. The visibility was decent, so we were able to look over the crest of the mountain and actually see the Chilean side of the Andes, which I thought was pretty cool. And after taking some pictures, it was time to go down. Quickly, I learned I was not used to skiing on fresh powder all the way up there at the top, and I barely left the starting line when Isabel had already texted me she was down at the bottom of the mountain. I was impressed. Eventually I got to the bottom and the last part of the blue route dumps you back onto that blue and beginner route that we had been practicing before. And it was neat to see that after going down that entire mountain, those parts that I was familiar with were a lot easier when I would have considered them kind of difficult just a couple hours earlier. So it's kind of cool to see yourself learning a skill in real time like that. After we got down, we went back up to the top again and hit the mountain all the way through one more time. I was more familiar with it, so it went a lot better. Isabel still smoked me, and man, when I got to the bottom, my quads were on fire this time. After catching with Isabel at the bottom, I was telling her it's interesting because if you asked me, I probably wouldn't tell you that I could snowboard, which is weird because I just snowboarded down this whole mountain 2 times. There was a ton of mistakes and a lot of falling, but I don't think mistakes mean that you can't do something. I think it maybe just means that you aren't very good yet. And this got me thinking more about our Spanish progress because Isabel and I have been talking a lot about how this year our whole goal is to learn Spanish. But when do we start to classify ourselves as Spanish speakers? Or when would we tell somebody, hey, I can speak Spanish? Now, I've been enjoying my Spanish progress, but I've been absolutely floored by Isabel's. In hindsight, I'm not too surprised because she can absolutely consume any information through her dedication to learning it. She often stays up at night just practicing the Spanish that she had learned earlier that day. Anyway, so we were curious when to call ourselves Spanish speakers. We've had a few days where we've hung out with people and only spoke Spanish for the entire day and had full conversations. So in some ways, I feel like that kind of justifies it, but we're still not sure. This past weekend, we went on a trip through the 7 Lakes region on a 12-hour road trip where our driver didn't speak any English. So you better believe we were speaking Spanish the whole time. And I was impressed with Isabel's ability to just keep up with what to me looked like ease. I could keep up with the gist and make some comments, which I think is still solid, but it was cool to see Isabel at the level she was at. I know it's tough though because the more you learn and the better you get, the less forgiving you are of your mistakes and the more you challenge yourself to be able to say. All this to say is after that car ride, she told me that she thinks she's finally going to start identifying as a Spanish speaker, or at least telling people that she can speak Spanish, which is huge and is way more than we ever thought that we'd be able to do when we first set out on this goal this year, with our goal of just trying to be conversational. For me, I don't think I'm there yet, which got me thinking more kind of like the snowboarding thing. Maybe there's a step in between for people like me where we don't really feel like we're good enough to call ourselves Spanish speakers or snowboarders, but that doesn't mean we can't exactly do it. Maybe there's a step in there where we can identify as bad snowboarders or bad Spanish speakers. We know a lot about what we should do, but maybe we fail in the execution. I think for me, that kind of sounds like where I'm at. And they always say the first step in getting good at something is to be bad at it. So for all of my folks that are also bad at things, may we celebrate our progress so far and get excited for the future. Thanks for watching.